Have you ever felt like everything is exhausting? Or you feel numb inside, like you can't really feel anything? Good stuff happens and you feel zilch, like food doesn't taste good anymore. Maybe you have no motivation. Or you feel like just curling up into a ball, never moving again. You don't want to be around anyone and you just shut down. Or maybe everything seems fine in life, like you have a good job, good friends, but you just can't feel any joy in it. Now, some might describe this as depression, but there's another way to look at it. From a nervous system perspective, this is called hypoarousal, the dorsal vagal response, or the shutdown state, and it's closely related to trauma, especially childhood trauma. In this video, we're going to explore how our nervous system's response to fear, adversity, or trauma can get stuck in our body and trigger depression. And the good news is that this understanding opens up some great treatment options for both trauma and depression. Now, real quick, we have to talk about what causes depression. In the past, there's been an overly simplified view of depression, that it was laziness or a simple chemical imbalance. So the theory of low serotonin, for example, that's been disproven. But the truth is that depression is probably many different diseases with various underlying problems, and then the symptoms show up as depression. So why would underlying causes from grief to trauma to low self-esteem to thyroid disorders or Lyme disease all show up with this same cluster of symptoms? Depression is a universal response. We can find it in every country in the world, in modern first world office workers, and in hunter-gatherer societies. We can find it in the rich and in the poor, the physically healthy and the sick. So far from being a simple physical condition, depression expert Charles Raisen has said that one thing that all the forms of depression have in common is that depression is a universal response to being overwhelmed. It's when the internal and external pressures trigger a switch in our brain and body from, I can handle this, to, I can't handle this. This is a subconscious survival response in our nervous system. This is a flip that gets switched in our nervous system, and it can be really hard to unflip that switch. Let's use an example of childhood trauma. Let's say that as a child you saw your parents fight a lot, and sometimes those fights would turn violent. Now this feels terribly dangerous for a kid, because it is. Now, if your dad was hurting your mom, maybe you tried to fight him off to stop him, but that didn't work and it actually put you in more danger because he was too strong. If you tried to run for help, you'd be punished worse. That would put you in more danger. Freezing up and watching them was also dangerous. So as a child, all you could do was withdraw and hide in your room. If this happened enough times, or if the trauma was severe enough, or if you were a sensitive soul, you would do anything you could to distract yourself or numb the pain. Maybe you would daydream. Maybe you would turn on a show to escape. When there's nothing we can do to stop the danger or to escape it, your nervous system protects you by making you detach. And the threats don't have to be physical. It could be caused by emotional threats as well. One of my followers said, I learned that no matter how hard I tried, I would be belittled, insulted, misunderstood, and cast in a negative light. It made me hesitant to do literally anything, spending hours, days, years in bed, scared of what would happen and how I'd be treated, ruminating on everything I'd done and would do wrong, and feeling defeated to the point of no longer trying. Chronically feeling unsafe, emotionally or physically, wears us down and can trigger depression. So what's going on in the nervous system here? Our nervous system has different levels of response to threat, each serving a specific purpose. Our default state is the ventral vagal state. This is feeling calm, safe, and connected. This parasympathetic state lets us rest, digest, and experience joy. When faced with a threat that we believe we can handle, we enter a sympathetic state. So a small threat leads to a fight response, which is increased energy. A bigger threat leads to a flight response, where we're going to escape, and an even bigger threat leads to a freeze response, where you're immobilized but very alert. When we perceive a situation as completely overwhelming or inescapable, our body switches to the dorsal vagal state, also known as hypoarousal or the shutdown state. This is when your body conserves energy, your heart rate and your blood pressure drop. You feel numb, exhausted, or depressed. You may disconnect from others, maybe even disconnect from yourself. This isn't just like a psychological response. It's not just in your head, it's measurable in your body. Scientists call it tonic immobility in animals, and in humans, it often shows up as depression. Whether this is triggered by a single traumatic event or by chronic stress, this state is your body's way of protecting you when it believes there's no other way out. Hypoarousal is a survival response. It's when your body flips a switch from I can overcome this to all my efforts seem pointless. Let's just conserve our energy. Okay, one of my subscribers said, in my experience, depression is when you can no longer muster the energy it takes to hope. It's what happens when fighting your trauma has just created more trauma. And one day you wake up unwilling to fight anymore. It's just too exhausting. Now this state of hypoarousal or dorsal vagal response, this state can get triggered by one extreme trauma, like being kidnapped, or by a low level but chronic stress, like constantly fighting discrimination in society. It can be triggered by the death of a loved one. This is an overwhelming loss that you can't fight your way out of. Or it can be caused by being stressed out and overwhelmed for too long by bills or work or family problems, or by a stream of negative thoughts telling you that you're worthless. And it can be caused by hypervigilance from past trauma. Lovely M said, trauma causes an inability to feel safe, always being on the alert. It feels exhausting and depleting, and as if you cannot enjoy life, as if you're always on hypervigilant mode waiting for the other shoe to drop. And Sophia said, trying to stay calm with a hair-triggered alarm system is exhausting. Now, this nervous system reaction, this shutdown response, is not a disorder. It's an instinctual response to protect you from pain and from harm and to attempt to force you to rest and recover. You'll see animals do this when they're trapped or they're overwhelmed by a predator. And if this is how you survived as a child, then you may have developed the habit of slipping into that state in order to protect yourself from other stressors or trauma. So ask yourself this question. Did shutting down protect you in some way when you experienced trauma? Did going quiet or hiding or withdrawing protect you from some hurt? Whether it was physical abuse that you couldn't fight off, or conflict with your parents, or hiding from shame and embarrassment, shutting down can be an effective survival response as a child. It's a learned habit that's hard to get out of, and it looks a whole lot like depression. Another follower said, I think trauma, even the less heavy forms of it, pushes your life away from what you want and your values toward something that you think you need to be safe. This happens unconsciously, and in the end, you live a life that might be good on paper that you don't really like, but you have no idea why or why it feels off. I think deep down you feel torn inside, but you have no idea how to mend it. So as we explore hypoarousal, it becomes clear that this is a form of dissociation. The body's protecting you from pain. It's totally functional if you're a gazelle getting chewed on by a cheetah. It prevents the gazelle from feeling much pain. And in some situations, like this video shows, it provides the gazelle a chance to escape and survive. Okay, so the shutdown response serves a function. Okay, let me give you another example. How about low-level chronic threat? Let's say someone's facing slow starvation. There's a famine in the land. The dorsal vagal response numbs you to the pain of hunger. It dulls your appetite, and it conserves energy by slowing down your heart rate, breathing, and metabolism. This shutdown response could help you survive until food is available again. But most of us aren't in a famine. Getting stuck in a dorsal vagal response is totally not functional if your negative thoughts trapped you in the state of being unable to leave your bed. So let's just talk real quickly about what hypoarousal feels like. Here's the Venn diagram. Symptoms of depression include worthlessness or guilt, restlessness or irritability, body aches and pain, or suicidal thoughts. Symptoms of hypoarousal include muscle weakness, poor coordination, decreased sensitivity to stimuli like hot and cold, and a low heart rate. Now, symptoms of both, we're going to see the overlap here, include feeling numb, detached, overwhelmed, low motivation, feeling frozen, hopeless, helpless, sad, or apathetic, difficulty moving, fatigue, brain fog, poor sleep, or social withdrawal. So if that sounds like you, let's talk about what we can do about it. Depression isn't caused by trauma for everyone. Your body can get overwhelmed and trigger that shutdown response from other situations like a physical illness or outside circumstances where you lack the resources to feel safe. But when we look at how common trauma is and how closely it's connected with depression, it's probably caused by a form of hypoarousal for a lot of people. The ACEs study explored the connection between childhood trauma and depression, and people with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences were more than 3 times as likely to develop depression than someone without childhood trauma. Okay, here's another question you might be asking. What if it doesn't seem like you've dealt with any huge threat? Now, sometimes we subconsciously create our own overwhelming threat by sending ourselves little messages over and over that train your brain to feel hopeless. So this includes thinking things like, this will never work out. I'd better expect the worst so I don't get disappointed. I'm such a failure. why bother trying? I'll just mess up again. Or people, all of them, are so awful. This world is so cruel. Everything is worse than it ever was. Can you see how constantly thinking like this on repeat is going to make you feel like it's pointless to keep trying? Our nervous system does not care if it's a real threat or a perceived threat, something in our mind. When we visualize something threatening or overwhelming, it triggers the exact same physiological response in our nervous system. This is why watching a scary movie can make your hands sweaty, but you're actually safe. Your brain is perceiving danger and turning on that fight or flight response, or in the case of this, the shutdown response. Also, things that seem very small to an adult can seem completely overwhelming to a child. A parent laughing at you, a friend bullying you, a peer rejecting you, a teacher correcting you. This small t trauma can add up over time to reinforce the shutdown response because you just don't feel safe. Now, you may have developed a habit of slipping into that state in order to protect yourself from other stressors. It's a learned habit that's hard to get out of. School is stressful? Numb out and detach. I don't care about school. You get in a fight with your parents? Oh well, I don't care about my parents, right? Nobody likes me anyway. I'm not gonna try. Let's say your parents are critical of you. I'll never match their expectations, so why bother trying? Right? There's a lot of ways we numb out and detach ourselves to try and protect ourselves from pain. Also, when we constantly perceive danger all around us, or we lack the safety net of loving and supportive family, our nervous system can literally flip a switch to the dorsal vagal response, leaving us feeling depressed, numb, or helpless. And when that's happened over and over, especially in childhood, this can wire our brain to be more likely to be depressed. Okay, so if depression is fueled by trauma, how can we treat it? Slipping into a shutdown response isn't something you're doing on purpose. It's not your fault, but there is something you can do about it. You can build up the ability to have more of a say about what your nervous system does and how it reacts. So let's talk about 4 ways to do that. First thing we're gonna do is build awareness. Let's learn to notice what's going on in your body. So when you can notice what the signs are that you're in a state of hypoarousal, you can name that state. So you can say, oh, I'm noticing that I'm in the shutdown state. Now this is a lot easier with a therapist who's informed in somatic or polyvagal theory. So in session, I would say something like, hey, I noticed that you're going quiet. Your body looks like it's kind of slumped, or you're curling up into a ball on my couch. What are you noticing? It seems like you're feeling a little overwhelmed. Are you starting to think that everything is hopeless? Now, if my client in that situation was super dissociated, we might spend the whole session exploring that numbness and then also what connectedness to the present moment is like. So I might say something like, I might grab a stone. I have like all these random things in my desk. I might grab like a stone like this and hand it to them and be like, hey, can you hold this? Can you feel this in your hands? Or I would have them practice grounding themselves in their senses. What can you feel, right? What do your pants feel like right now? What can you see in this room? What can you hear? And I would have them describe it in detail. So that's the first step to overcoming this dorsal vagal response. Now, the next step is to add in some movement. So when we understand that depression might be a nervous system state, we understand that to go from hypoarousal to safety, we have to move through activation. One of the best treatments for hypoarousal is physical movement. And interestingly enough, tons of research shows that exercise is one of the most effective treatments for depression. So we show our brain that we are safe and capable by moving our body. In a session, I might ask a client to do some physical movement. Can you pat your legs? Can you sit up with your back straight? I mean, of course, doing aerobic exercise for like 40 minutes a day is ideal, but simple things like making your body big, shaking your arms, jiggling your legs, laughing really hard, dancing, yoga, a 5-minute walk. All of these things tell your body that here in this moment, you are safe and capable. And that sends a message to your nervous system and you can start feeling better emotionally. Other things you can try include like quick, intense breathing. So like, notice how that's very different from the slow breathing that triggers like more calm nervous system. Sing some upbeat music, use an engaged posture, hold yourself up big, right? Find something that'll make you laugh hard, or try eating some crunchy or spicy foods. All of these things can help you re-engage with your senses. Now, we're not fighting our body here, right? We're learning to listen to your body and reconnect with it. The signals it's sending is okay. The goal is to restore your sense of safety, which includes your ability to overcome threats or challenges. And that can help flip that switch back up to like, okay, I can do this, I can face this. Okay, and that's the third step, right? The third step is asking, how do you show your nervous system that you are safe and capable? When it knows this, it's gonna automatically return to a sense of safety. You could say something to yourself like, I know that as a child, withdrawing kept you safe, but now you're an adult, you're safe here and now. You can solve this problem by facing it. Now, acting on this might look like facing your fears, or solving problems, or leaving a toxic environment. So for example, if you're in an abusive relationship, you leave. If you're drowning in stress at work, you sit down and you make a plan to create a more sustainable approach. If you're struggling with debt, let's make one small change. Let's make a budget or cancel one subscription. When you take any action, even small ones, even when you don't feel like it, that's movement, and it sends a message to your brain that you are safe and capable. And that can help your nervous system reset to be more active. Psychologists call this behavioral activation, and it is one of the most effective treatments for depression. And understanding polyvagal theory explains why. The action makes your nervous system move up a level from the shutdown to the sympathetic state. And this starts a feedback loop in your brain and body, and most likely you'll begin to feel more energetic and more motivated. Now, I understand this can seem really impossible to do on your own, so of course I'd recommend that if you can, do this work with a therapist to help break this down into tiny steps. There's another way to show your brain that you have enough support to overcome challenges. So often it's the perception that things are hopeless, not actually reality. So a few ways that we remind our brain that we're actually safe, we convince our brain to change its perception. Some of these practices like gratitude practice, right? You remember and you pay attention to the good things in your life. Or the 3 good things exercise, where you remind yourself of the good things that you do. Or you surround yourself with supportive people. So one of the most effective ways to stop a trauma response is to connect, to make eye contact with and hug a safe and supportive human being. Or an animal, because this sends a message to your nervous system that you are safe. So the more messages our nervous system receives that we're safe, when we perceive safety by remembering all the good in our life, that helps our brain be like, okay, actually, I am capable. I can overcome this. And it'll flip that switch back up into safe mode. Okay, number 4, lastly, sometimes the hypoarousal response is your body's message that you need to rest and take a break. You might just actually be worn down. Sometimes you need to give yourself time to rest and recover. Give yourself grace and compassion. Allow yourself to mourn and feel sad and process an old hurt so that you can move through it and come out on top. During this time of rest and recovery, you want to fill your body with good nutrients. Give it gentle movement. Treat yourself with love. Surround yourself with supportive people. Take time to rest and curl up on the couch and read a book, right? All of these things can send a message to your nervous system that you are safe. Now, with all 4 of these practices, you can return to the ventral vagal or the safe and sound state of your nervous system. When we look at depression from a nervous system perspective, it gives us permission to be gentle with ourselves, to understand where these feelings are coming from, and some practical ways to work through them. We're gonna notice what's going on in our bodies, add in some movement, build your sense of safety, and take time to replenish your resources. If you're dealing with trauma and depression, I hope this helps you take a small step today toward better mental health. And if you're ready to take bigger steps or to learn the essential skills to work through emotions, to process them, and to build your mental health and resilience, you could join my membership. It's about $27 a month, and I've got 8 courses on there. You watch 15-minute video a day, do a little workbook, and I guarantee you that your mental health is going to improve. You're going to feel more safe, more confident, more capable of managing these big, intense feelings that come up. So if you'd like to learn more, check out the link in the description. And as always, thank you for watching, and take care.